Hi, I'm Phil Kurz, contributing editor at TV Tech Magazine and TVTech.com. We're here today to talk about game changers in remote production workflows and technologies. Before we dive in, I want to remind everyone we will be giving away a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky member of our audience. Joining me on today's panel are Dion Lecointe, Director of Network Solutions at Sony Electronics, Stephen Repass, Vice President at Ross Video Production, Laurent Meja, Director of Product Line Management for Managed Switches and Modules at Netgear. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Let's get started. Uh, Dion, why don't you tell us a little bit about what is happening when it comes to encoding formats that are being used for contribution? Have certain ones emerged as staples of remote production, and is that landscape changing?
Yeah, I think the landscape is changing pretty drastically. You hit the nail right on the head. We're seeing a lot more implementation of REMI or remote production workflows across the market in the media and entertainment industry. And some of the staple codecs that people have been accustomed to, like J2K for getting high quality content across a network, has changed. We're now seeing more and more usage of JPEG XS as kind of the de facto standard for getting content from point A to points B through Z. And we're also seeing the utilization or higher utilization of low bit rate, low latency, high quality codecs like HEVC being used to complement JPEG XS transmissions. The practical matter of it is, anybody who's been involved in the remote production space has learned the lesson that not every venue is built the same. You don't have the same bandwidth going to each connection. You don't have the luxury of 10 gig pipes, 100 gig pipes going into your venues that are being brought back to your broadcast centers. So JPEG XS, while it is a powerful and very fast codec, HEVC is showing useful in places where you maybe only have 1 gig of bandwidth or 500 megs of bandwidth. So you can get the same amount of streams or even more streams utilizing a fraction of the bandwidth that you would use for JPEG XS. So I think those two codecs, those two formats are really changing the landscape in addition to how people implement REMI workflows, where it was just across terrestrial networks. Now we're seeing the use of cloud, of course. We're seeing 5G coming into the conversation, and HEVC lends itself pretty well to all of those different transportation modes, if you will.
Stephen, Ross Production Services should have a pretty good view of this evolving market. You do more than 500 productions per year, and many are for some of the biggest names in sports entertainment like ESPN and NBC. You have traditional OB vehicles, fly packs, you have on prem control rooms that support REMI, and you offer cloud production services. That's a lot. Why don't you start off with giving us how you an idea of how you see where things stand today with remote production.
Yeah, I think, Remy's been around for a while. But I think when people think of Remy, I think it's an old term, by the way. I think we evolved from Remy. But a lot of people think of Remy, our clients, they think they're saving money. But are they saving money? Okay. Do you have a control room? Do you have the staff? You got to bring all those feeds back. That costs money, unless you have your own solution like LTN and things like that. So we evolved to what we call distro now. It's distributed production, where people are sitting at home and remoting into the truck. So you don't need the control room anymore. So you have a truck on site, use it. You don't need to bring feeds back to a control room. We can remote right into the truck, expression, Mira, all of it. And so, we evolve that way because at the end of the day, our clients are looking at saving money. And if we can cut down on T&E, have people stay at home, it's a better solution for us than a Remy production, a traditional Remy that you would see feeds coming back to a control room and then a control room going back to, whatever the end destination is. So for us, it's distro. It's keeping people at home. How do you get through that? You need good internet, VPN networks, things like that, but it's reliable. Right now, 90% of our shows that we do for all our clients, our graphics operators are at home. They don't travel anymore. So, most of the time there's a team going in to the expression. So I think we evolved that way. I think we're continuing to evolve and trying to figure out how we can take the next step with distro. and how can we get more out of it, and how can we add distro to a higher level show that might be on ESPN or ESPN2, and things like that. Unlike Remy, where you need a control room, you need staff, you need to bring the feeds back. Why don't you use the gear that you already have? It's on site. So that's what we evolved into, and we actually made other versions of our truck called distro trucks, where we literally strip the trucks out, and all you have in there is an Expression, a Mira, a Carb Ultra, and an FR2 router. And literally, it's all we have. And we take that around and we do distros, and everybody remotes into the truck, and it's worked very well. But you have to rely on internet. I think that's the biggest thing. Is internet is key for something like this. But it's been very successful for us so far.
Laurent, there's this ongoing transition in terms of the use of IP, and that extends to signal routing on-prem as well. So I know that we're past the early days of that, but I'm just wondering, where do you think the industry stands right now in terms of remote production and this transition to IP? Is it still going to be a mix of baseband and IP for quite a while?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we see at Netgear AV. I mean, technically speaking, originally the SDI feeds or video and audio were, digital or uh, analog, and then they were converted to IP just for the transfer to the main destination, and then we set as original. And now, yes, of course, there is a lot of ongoing projects so that directly remote in the remote production, the truck or the remote site, we see that those streams are manipulated and worked out directly with IP conversion. That's the transition to AV over IP using a variety of different codecs. We mentioned that different technologies from ST2110 to NDI to Dante Audio to AES67. And then IP to IP is probably this way, the new way. But to answer your question, it's really hard to give you a percentage. Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40, 70-30? We don't know. But we still see a whole lot many of trucks and remote production organizations still manipulating analog and digital and converting through the WAN. Yeah.
Dion, getting back to encoding formats for a moment, I would imagine that there is a quality versus bit rate sort of equation when it comes to selecting what encoding format's going to be used. Can you give us a sense of that bit rate versus visually lossless encoding among the leading compression schemes that are being used in remote production?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I think it differs based on the codec that's being chosen, right? So, or being selected, excuse me. I think a number the standard way of thinking is, the lower number of eyeballs, the smaller your audience, the more acceptable it becomes to use a lower bit rate where you can accept some, loss in your video and your audio quality going across your link. But I think that dynamic is changing. So in today's world, we look at compression schemes like JPEG XS, where you are using, for 4K, right? You're using at least a gig, which is great because it's compared to 12 gig, it's a pretty big savings. You're using at least a gig of bandwidth to get 4K in HD, like 1080p. You're probably still using 100 megabits per second, 200 megabits per second to get a good 1080p stream delivered to your audience members, or back to production, I should say. And I think that's been predominantly the standard that most media organizations would use when utilizing contribution and codec technology. And then they would default to something like a transport stream, MPEG, for example. I've heard things, codecs as low as 5 megabits per second. I think most broadcasters would lean in on 15 megabits per second to get their signals across. But again, with the advent of codecs like HEVC, which have really proven to be, again, visually lossless, and the benefits compared with latency compared to JPEG XS are really much on par. We're seeing people getting away with 15 megabit per second and still producing a really high quality output with their production. We recommend, from Sony perspective, we generally recommend 25 megabits per second, 35 megabits per second for 1080p. That's just a recommendation. But in conversations that I've had with a lot of the broadcasters that we deal with, is they still want to hit that sweet spot of 15 to 20 megabits per second because, again, they're constrained by their pipes, and they want to get as many streams into those bandwidth into those pipes as possible. So yeah, for JPEG XS, you're looking at 1.5 for 4K, 100 or 200 for HD 1080p. And then for HEVC, we're thinking, but you're seeing probably between 15 to 25 being the standard for those streams.
Stephen, how does that stack up to your experience with your customers?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with our customers when we go transition from Remy to distro is making sure they feel comfortable, right? Operators sitting at home, is there redundancy, things like that. And I think the biggest thing comes down from an ATL perspective is from the production side is they want the same feel, right? So if you're sitting at home, the client wants to feel like they're sitting in the truck, all right? So sometimes some of our competitors do have some good cloud solutions, but maybe they don't have the best multi-viewers. And I think for us using Ultrix, you get that truck feel from sitting at home with our Ultrix with our multi-viewers. I think that is awesome. That's one of the best things that we have. Also, I think latency, right? If the latency isn't good, how can you actually produce or direct a show from home? If the latency isn't there. So, we partner up with Bitfire and pretty much got latency down to nothing. So it doesn't even feel like it feels like you're in the truck. And I think for us, those are the two biggest thing is making sure a client feels comfortable and then making sure whoever's sitting in that chair for us feel like they're sitting in a truck or sitting into a control room. Having that reliability, I think for us has been huge.
Laurent, tell me about your thoughts on IP standards that are being used in remote production. Obviously, there's SMPTE ST2110, uh, there's NDI, there's on the audio side AES67 that's part of 2110, Dante, others. Uh, what's typically being deployed these days, and is it a mix of video? Well, I shouldn't say just video because ST2110 is more than video, but is it a mix of these standards?
Yeah, this is definitely a mix. I mean, I think many of us mentioned that from the beginning. You always have to ponder cost. So it's a matter of budget and cost. And when cost needs to be revised down a little bit, you must admit that transitioning straight away to the ST2110 real infrastructure for video and audio, it comes with a cost because all the elements, I mean, needs to be compatible with ST2110. So when it's not possible, and I'm including the network in there, so we see more and more some mixed environments. That's right. So ST2110 is there, but you will see also some NDI. NDI is a very cost-effective way of manipulating AV over IP from the source to destination. NDI latency is high, but it's still deemed okay when everything is in sync. We see on the rise IPMX. I mean, this is the AIMS Alliance. IPMX is meant to be a bridge between PTP aware and non-PTP aware equipment, including the network. From an audio standpoint, you're right. AES67 is definitely part of ST2110. From a broadcast standpoint, from a boundary clock, PTP aware networking. But you also have some, variants of AES67. Dante, QSys is, also found. So I must admit that more and more, and across the region, not only US, but also Europe and Asia Pacific, we see more and more mixed environments. And the great thing is that all these great members on this panel know that the production servers can aggregate many of those and unify them.
So, Dion, a lot of this conversation so far has kind of centered on the whole concept of video quality when it comes to encoding, and I'm just wondering, do you find that various levels of quality and the expense that's involved with delivering that quality uh, are applied, I guess would be a good way to put it, to the size of the event or the type of the event that is being produced remotely.
Yeah, I think that that still happens, but we're actually, we believe and we're pushing the message that it doesn't need to be that way anymore, right? That the technologies have advanced in such a way that, you don't want, I don't want, you shouldn't have to disparage or treat a smaller production or a smaller event with lower quality output that you would, your big primetime, tier 1 production. We brought products to market like our ME80 product, for example, utilizing Sony's kind of spin on the HEVC technology that has latency that's less than 2 frames compared to JPEG XS, and visually lossless compared to JPEG XS or compared to the original signal. And you can get signals across a pipe that are, like I said, 25 megabits per second, 35 megabits per second, sometimes lower if that's what you want, but you're not negatively impacting the quality of the production output that you're giving to your audience members. So yeah, I do think that there's still quite a lot of people who have this mindset, and it's not wrong, right? It's the streaming mindset. The more bits you throw at your signal, the better quality. But if I don't have the pipe, I have to throw less bits at that, and I have to accept that that's what I'm going to get from my output. I think that that dynamic has shifted and should be shifting toward, with these newer technologies, you can get a level quality out of your smaller, your tier 2, tier 3 productions to match your tier 1 productions. And because of the products that are on the market, like our ME80 product, like our RPU7 product, you're able to put that with any of the production equipment that you're currently utilizing.
Stephen, so with regard to the production cloud services, you mentioned that your customers are probably this applies to everything that you offer, but your customers are seeking to uh, have cost-effective solutions. I'm sure quality fits into this as well, this discussion. But you also mentioned that specifically with the cloud production services offering, you're able to have graphics operators, for instance, work remotely and without experiencing any latency that would cause any problems in the production of a remote show. Um, I'm just wondering, um, does this ability not to have the expense of sending these graphics operators and maybe other operators as well to remote sites lowers the overall cost? I'm sure that meets your clients' needs in one respect, but does that mean that they're producing more content? They might not they're doing shows that may not have the economics related to them previously
Yep.
that could be supported that can now be supported. Is that how that's all working out?
Yeah, I think for us, it's opened up a new client door, right? New opportunities for us from RPS that maybe we couldn't ever hit the price point they needed us to hit. As you guys know in this call, the digital platform is insane. The amount of new leagues that are out there, the amount of things that are being produced on digital platforms is insane. And they can't afford the same cost of doing something on linear for ESPN or NBC. So for us, it's opened up a door where we can now be a part of some of those breakout new leagues that are developing that may not have the budget that another client would have. So we have to be creative on how we make certain budgets work. And for us, T&E is, one of the biggest costs outside of freelance costs. So how can we cut down on T&E? How can we make our clients happy? How can we help cut their bills down, keep them happy, things like that. So I think for us, it's opened up the door, but it's also made our clients, our existing clients, happier, right? They're cutting costs. They're still seeing very good productions, right? It's all about the quality, right? They still want high quality. They want to see the same type of production, but if they can save a little bit and for us open new doors, I think it's been huge as the digital platform and the amount of leagues, the new leagues. I think there was an article a couple years ago. I think in the past 5 years, there's been 20 plus new leagues that have developed and opened since COVID. So it's growing, and we're able to be part of it because of our creative workflows that we have at Ross. And I think it's opened doors and has made our current clients happy.
So, Laurent, getting back to this mixed IP environment they were talking about for a moment, I'm guessing that the deployment of multiple IP standards compounds network configuration challenges that have to be overcome. Could you discuss those a little bit?
Yeah, sure, because this is a paradox, for those 10, 15 years of transition to AV over IP, everybody knows that IP, is great, it brings scale, it streamlines the whole design for the production. You need more, you just add more network ports, but there is a barrier to entry, which is the complexity on the network. And I heard in this panel that NDI is simple. That's true. Dante is simple too. But the networks need to be configured. And when you come to a remote production that has a mix of AES-67, those bell packs, those antennas, those headsets, some microphones with Dante, some maybe a QSys, around for control. And then on the video side, when you start to mix and match NDI and all the way up to IPMX and ST2110, you have literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of configuration commands to enter into the network infrastructure to make it work together. And those technologies, those IP codecs, they don't play fair with each other. When you configure one on the network, you can impair the performance of the others. So, I mean, this is the sad reality. Sometimes the transition to AV over IP is being blocked by the complexity, that comes from the networking. So we'll maybe speak about that a little bit later, but this is what Netgear AV has been doing for the past 10 years quite successfully. We try to remove that complexity, make it more simple.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Dion, maybe quite a bit. Tell what is 5G having any impact on remote production? If so, what sorts of benefits does it bring to the party?
Yeah, I think it's starting to. I think 5G, it's still in its infancy. A lot of customers are exploring 5G applications. We've done a number of case studies and a number of POCs with customers. We did golf very recently with one of the big networks here in the US, where we're proving out the feasibility and viability of 5G for live production. The reality is 5G has a lot of promise to it. It's a lot of bandwidth. You also have the ability to segment off private 5G networks versus your public 5G networks. So we do envision a world where broadcasters can use 5G production in scenarios like sports, where you're inside a sporting venue and you need to get your camera signals back from the remote cameras that are floating around the stadium or arena back to the truck or back to the control room in the stadium in the venue. And we've shown that that can work, right? And um, the bandwidth is there. With that same HEVC technology that Sony developed, we can get it there with latency and high quality, low latency and high quality. So it feels like it's interchangeable with your wired cameras that are within the stadium. So 5G shows a lot of promise. I think some of the things that the industry are still waiting for to play out really comes in the area of government regulation, right? Is the FCC going to allow for broadcasters to segment off private 5G when necessary to produce content? Or will they allow them to piggyback off of public 5G and maybe manage it that way? Not having a huge impact in the market just yet, but I think a lot of the media organizations that are out there are really chomping at the bit. They are like holding back the dogs, waiting for an opportunity where they can make 5G a realistic and viable part of their remote production applications.
Stephen, are you hearing anything from broadcasters or your other clients that indicates their interest in 5G? And do you have any experience employing 5G in remote productions?
No, not yet. For us, the biggest talks about, our bread and butter sports. And, SG is not, 5G is not being brought up. I think a couple of things that have been happening with us as sports is HDR. It's been a huge topic lately and it's being pushed by one network, to be honest with you, from a sports standpoint. And they're pushing it really hard. So I think you're going to see more of that, and then, I think 1080p is continuing to evolve even with our networks. One of the biggest networks out there is now finally going to be transitioning to 1080p. So I think, for us, those are the two things that I think are being talked about. 4K, not in sports, but I think our clients in entertainment, 4K is being continuing to be brought up, things like that. But from a sports standpoint, I think 1080p and HDR are the top topics right now.
Just to follow up on the HDR discussion, how is that being handled? Are they using HLG in the field, or are they uh, up converting to
Eh,
HDR from SDR on the
Yeah,
output of the switcher? How's that all playing out?
yeah, it's being up converted right now. I'd say it's a challenge from how we're handling it because traditionally HDR has not been involved into sports. So we're evolving to figure out ways to do it and improve it. But right now, it's mostly being up converted.
Okay, thank you. So I asked you, Laurent, I asked you about the challenges previously. There have been several industry initiatives to bring broadcast engineers up to speed on the complexities of configuring IP networks for television. Standards organizations also have done their part. Is there anything switch vendors can do to remove some of the complexity?
Oh, yes, obviously. So, of course, I mean, I'm going to now talk a little bit about Netgear EV because I can't comment much, on the other enterprise
Sure.
major vendors out there. But you're right. What those alliances and organizations for standards, they have published, the right way of configuring networks for ST2110, for AS67. And in some extent, we have also certification processes out there with NDI and some other AV codec manufacturers. So configuring the networks, it's a knowledge, but you have a learning curve. So what the switch manufacturers and what Netgear AV did 10 years ago, we said, well, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to support hundreds and hundreds of different AV over IP, you need to manipulate hundreds and hundreds of different configuration files. So we at Netgear AV during the pandemics, because we got some time actually, we started from a empty page again, and now we have profiles. So we just pack those certified configurations into easy to use profiles so that we can apply those profiles to ports, the red, the yellow, the blue. And this way we make it easier. But let me tell you that in addition to the basic default configuration that is a given, you now have to deal with interoperability and conflicts potentially between those AV codecs. So, what Netgear AV has done over the years, we first, had a hard time helping our AV system integrators, consultants, and customers over the years, and we have found some techniques, in order to, configure the networks. Eliminating those conflicts by prioritizing the PTP, the timing protocol, in such a way that we ignore the DSCPs. We just, take the PTP into the fast lane, into the fast queue for perfect sync. Multicast has been another hassle that Netgear AV has to fix because those multicasting settings are not the same between the tiny audio devices and the large video encode decode units. And I could go on, on a long list. So to me, as a product manager, I would say that the network should not be a barrier. The network should facilitate the transition to AV over IP. And I believe that it's a much better solution going with the certified switch platforms and having easy to use, because it's not that we believe everybody is dumb, but complexity leads to a misconfiguration, which is the best enemy in a AV over IP production.
Dion, so we've talked about different models of production, remote production. We haven't really talked so much about cloud-based production. Are you seeing all of the production tech that's available in, real things that you can touch that you would find in a traditional OB vehicle becoming available in the cloud as virtual equivalents?
Sure, sure. I'd like to address that, but I'd also like to tag on to something Steven said about HDR, just to
Sure.
share a different perspective, because we're seeing HDR being implemented in different ways. What Steven said, we're definitely seeing that being implemented where people are just converting from SDR to HDR at the output. But we're also seeing a lot of work being done to originate in HDR. There's a lot of work being done to make sure that the cameras are painted with a specific look. There's a lot of work being done to ensure that all of the tools throughout the production chain, the cameras, the switching graphics, the monitors all support some form of HDR. And one of the biggest efforts that are still remaining out there is that what you're originating in HDR still looks good in SDR, right? So we're seeing looks from, NBC has a LUT, CBS has a LUT, NHK, BBC, they all have LUTs. So there's a lot of work in for, I guess, at the higher end to ensure that they have great HDR output. But I do agree that 1080p HDR is going to be the holy grail for sports, and I think even for news in some ways. And 4K is going to have kind of limited usage within live production spaces. And I do think that that dovetails well into the question you asked about cloud. So we're seeing a pretty big push to get what you would find in a truck in any live production control room deployed on the cloud. There are some solutions that are out there right now that I think are scratching the surface of doing that. Sony, we introduced our M2LX live production platform, which includes a production switcher, an audio mixer. It has in clip players, it has in graphics, but we made a big emphasis on the ability to integrate with third-party systems. We didn't want it to be a closed ecosystem. So the fact that you can integrate with HTML5 for graphics, that you can integrate with third-party audio mixers, that you can do external graphics, or excuse me, external control, as well as the GUI control, are things that are really trying to move the industry toward that cloud-based production workflow. Now, if pressed, I think we have a few years before we truly see end-to-end cloud solutions that the industry really trusts. Right now, we think that the industry is still in a transition phase. They're going to continue to use their on-premises, purpose-built appliances for some of their tier one productions. And then we're going to see cloud used more so in tier two and tier three, right? So something to augment that hardware. Or if the show is big enough, we'll see cloud combined with the hardware, which really gives our customers the best of both worlds. They can use the same control panel, the same interface to run their hardware switcher, as well as the cloud-based switcher or the software switcher. So I like to say, and Sony likes to say, that the industry is really in a space of virtualization right now. They're trying to convert the existing production tools to software so they can run it on COTS equipment. And then from the COTS equipment, it's going to go to the cloud. But again, that I don't want to overlook the fact that there are solutions like some from Sony that are already deployed on the cloud. So I think we're in transition for a few years, but yes, I do think we're going to see a place where the cloud dominates and can run everything.
So just let me follow up with you. In the real world, where there's something you can really touch, it's in a rack or whatever. There is a strategy of known as best of breed. So I might get a production switcher from one company, I might get playout servers from another company, et cetera, et cetera. Is that concept going to be available to broadcasters and to those involved in production in the cloud so they will seamlessly be able to put together what they consider a best of breed of various cloud-based solutions? Is that the direction things are going to go?
We certainly think so. We certainly think so, and that's the direction we're moving in. So we, again, with the M2LX, we created it with the idea in mind that we can integrate with vendors so the best in breed audio console can integrate with our M2LX. The best in breed graphic systems can integrate with our M2LX. So we certainly believe that that is the best path forward, and I believe that there are ongoing discussions with SMPTE and EBU to discuss things like interoperability between systems on the cloud. So I think there is an effort there. I don't know where they are currently with those discussions, but I do think that that's the best outcome for the industry overall. Is you're not locked into one specific solution. You can still pick the best and combine it together to give you the best possible output.
So this question I'm going to ask to I'll start off I guess with Stephen, but I also want to ask Craig, and I also want to ask you, Dion, this question. What about control surfaces when you, in the case of Stephen, what about control surfaces for your graphics operators who are sitting at home or in some office someplace or something, and accessing graphic systems remotely with next to no latency? Is it the control surface that they're accustomed to using for video production, or is it more of a mouse and keyboard and or how's that all being addressed?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a mixture of different types of solutions sitting at home. I think for us, it's making them feel comfortable with the expression. You're just team viewing into an actual expression, so it's super easy. It's just like you're almost sitting there in front of a real expression. I think once we convert to, like, even talking about the graphics operator, how are they on comms? Do they have a panel? Are they using an iPad? For us, we have a mixture of, people that have iPads. ClearComm is our solution for our comms. And now we have over 20, probably just mirror operators sitting at home with actual real panels, actual real mirror panel, and a real comms panel. So it's literally, they have the gear sitting at their house and they feel like they're actually in the truck because they have the pieces of gear right there in front of them. So I think there's a mixture. I think it's one, how do they feel comfortable? Some people like to use an iPad. Some people want a real panel for comms, right? Switchers, how do you switch to show? We have some people that actually have switchers sitting there in their houses. So I think there's different versions. And it really just comes down to what is the operator's comfort level. Where do they want to be? Are they comfort? Even for us, in our 3 control rooms here, we may have 10 to 15 people come through this control room and actually remote in from here to a truck because they're locally, they feel like the internet's better here. There's redundancy. I think that's key, right? So there's a lot of testing with, all right, well, you want to be a remote operator, or how good's your internet? What's our backup solution if that internet goes down or storm comes through? So, you guys were talking earlier about engineers and getting them up to speed. And you think about what we just did is, over the course of an entire Saturday, we could have 30 different remote operators sitting all over the country. And then how do you manage that? Who's the cloud engineer, which we're calling right now, to support that when there's an issue, checking in, making sure that, their internet's good. You can't really rely on the engineer on site to deal with that. They're dealing with everything else. Now we just added a layer to them by having this complexity of these operators sitting at home. And if they have issues, who's going to support that? The engineer on site can't take that time to do it. So for us, the hardest part is be able to have enough cloud engineer support to manage all these different things, all these different workflows we have. You guys talked about IP a little bit. That's a scary thought when you say IP in front of an engineer. So I think for us, it's just, what do they feel comfortable with? And then 2, how do we support it with engineers and getting them up to speed that they can support those type of workflows that is changing almost every day.
Dion, if you take a video production switcher into the cloud and you have all these operators out there who are familiar with various control surfaces, how are you seeing it being handled?
Yeah, so we want to, back to that point of create the most comfort possible, right? This industry, we are quick to create some of the most dynamic and powerful technology in the world, but we are slow to adopt it. So our thinking is create that migration path, right? So all of our tech has the ability to be controlled by a traditional control panel, a traditional software-based Sony control panel, or a traditional hardware-based control panel, or a software-based control surface as well. So even when you're operating on the cloud, like our M2LX solution, you have the ability of using the GUI that's presented to you on the web, or you have the ability to utilize a traditional Sony control panel, something that tons and tons of operators are more familiar with. Or you even have the ability to do something in between where you can use an Elgato Stream Deck to control that surface. So we're really trying to, keep pace, slightly ahead, but try to also keep pace with the industry and adoption trends to not leave those veteran operators out in the cold, giving them the opportunity to take advantage of the newer technology, but also embracing, as Craig said, that there's a new crop, a new generation of operators coming into the space who are much more comfortable with software, much more comfortable with single button interfaces like the Stream Deck. So across our offering on switchers in particular, you're going to see the ability to use hardware, use software, or use a combination of the two in a hybrid format.
So we just have a few minutes left, and I'd like you each to basically answer the same question. Try to take about a minute, if you would, minute and a half, something like that. So we'll start with you, Laurent. What is new at Netgear when it comes to switching in an IP environment for remote productions or any other of your new available technology?
Yes, Phil, thank you. Well, you know, switching, it's hardware, software, and service and support. So let me answer. We at Netgear have a collection of different series, you know, for the AV, starting from the 4250 to the 4350, 4500s. So we can accommodate different needs from 1 gig to 10 gig, 25 gig, 40 gig, 100 gig, soon enough, 400 gig. And this is the hardware, and we develop that hardware based on requirements with, you know, an AV console in Netgear coming from broadcast, but also professional AV. On the software side, as I said, we invested a lot of efforts into a AV operating system so that we ignore the type of hardware. The management platform is the same with an embedded AV user interface that is offering those profiles so that we can manage automation, interoperability between those codecs, and just apply preset configurations easy across the network. The latest and the greatest is a centralized management platform called the Engage platform. It's a software based on Windows or Mac that can do the same operating system for AV across the entire network, not switch by switch. And I will conclude that none of it would be relevant without the help from the ProAV Design team at Netgear, Netgear ProAV Design at netgear.com. This is a service and support team worldwide, 22 agents helping you, manufacturers, but also your clients, system integrators, consultants around the world across all time zones for pre-sales, but also the support. I heard about the cloud engineers helping out remote users. You know, at home we do the same for all type of AV over IP with the ProAV design team.
Thanks, Dion. What's new at Sony? What's the latest from Sony as relates to remote production?
Sure. Yeah. For us, it would be the continued emphasis on our Network Live. And Network Live isn't a specific technology, it isn't a specific business branch within Sony. It's really an ecosystem of solutions, products, services, and partners that help our customers take full advantage of their resources in high quality, mission control, live productions by connecting hybrid on premises and cloud capabilities. There are three pillars behind Network Live. They include network and resource orchestration, whereby customers control media flows and configure equipment, across LANs, WANs, 5G, and the cloud. There's media transport, which gives our customers the ability to transport their video, audio, and data across any network securely and in real time. And then there's hybrid processing and operations, creating the right model for live production by mixing that purpose built hardware with virtualized software or solutions that are deployed on the cloud. We're really seeing a lot of usage of our Network Live family of products, which includes our entire portfolio of live production solutions in different applications, including remote and distributed production, studios, venues, and facilities, in media contribution spaces, as well as in mobile production. So across Sony's portfolio, we have a concerted effort around making sure that our customers have the ability to produce content from virtually anywhere at virtually any scale. So whether you're looking at production switchers on-prem, production switchers on the cloud, where you're looking at getting content, from point A to point B using a LAN, a WAN, a 5G, or the cloud, we're pretty confident that not only do we have the solution and the expertise in our portfolio to help you lay that out, but we will work with you very closely to make sure that the delivered solution aligns with the vision that you have in your mind for your media organization.
Stephen, same question, although I know you provide services in
Sure.
what you do. What's the latest?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that we launched this year is our RPS 9, our brand new truck. It's our biggest truck yet. It's a 40-footer, double expando, has all the best of Ross gear. So for us, that was huge for us this year to launch that brand new truck. It's a true 4K truck, as we talked about 4K, but I think 4K in entertainment is different. So I think for us, the biggest thing is having the options for our clients, right? You talked about we have distro trucks, we have fins, we have Remy control rooms, we have RPS 9. I think we have distro. So it's giving that flexibility that opens doors up for RPS to get more involved in other services that maybe we haven't done in the past. And I think we're changing the way that you do Remy productions, as we call it, distro. And the cloud talks about, we talk about the cloud. I think it's going to be a mixture, and I think everybody's trying to find that next edge, that next thing. How can you cut a body on site, or how can you cut the costs here? That's clients are always looking for savings, so they're always asking us, what can we do? How can we cut a budget? So we're trying to evolve. I think audio is going to be a big one this coming year. I think, we work closely with Calric. I think they've come out with something very amazing lately that I think will be a game changer for at home audio mixing. That I think is one of the next things that we're going to get more involved in. We took the step with the Argos in our control rooms about a year and a half ago when Argo first came out. And when people were doing, let's say, traditional Remy, I think the issue they had is they had a mixer sitting in a control room. Then they still needed somebody on site to mix the local IFBs. Well, the Argo took that out. So you can mix the local IFBs from the Argo in the control room. So I think for us, we're continuing to evolve with audio and what's the next steps there. But I think RPS 9 was huge success for us this year. And I think just giving our clients options and being part of anything and everything, I guess, is where we want to be. And that's where we're going.
Well, that's all we have time for today. I want to thank our panelists, Dion Lecointe, Laurent Meja, and Stephen Repass for being here. One last thing, be sure to check out my articles and those of my colleagues at tvtech.com. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.